It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing two legends in dentistry. On the left, we got Corey Young, DDS, MBA, CVA. And on the right, we have Rod Johnston, MBA, CMA. Man, three bold beauties on a podcast. This might be too much for you to take in on YouTube. You might have to watch this one on iTunes. If you see this on YouTube, you'll probably immediately think you're on Pornhub, and it's not. But let's go to the bios. On the left, Corey Young joined Omni Practice Group in 2016 after a 20-year career as a general dentist and practice owner. In addition to his dental background, Corey has a master's in business administration, is a certified valuation analyst, and is an accredited business intermediary. Transitions in dentistry can be a complex process, and Corey enjoys using his advanced training and personal experience to help his fellow colleagues navigate these sometimes turbulent waters. I just ran into him when I was lecturing at the Ohio Dental Association meeting in Columbus, was it?
Yeah, it was in Columbus.
Yeah, and I harassed him in person until he relented and agreed to come on my show. And on the right, we have Rod Johnston, MBA, CMA in Seattle, Washington. Rod started Omni Practice Group in 2004 after a career in finance and accounting at AT&T Wireless. His background gave him the experience in a variety of areas, including accounting, legal, negotiations, real estate, which translates perfectly into the broker world. Rod has also worked in consulting dental practices on how to grow their practice. Rod has written numerous articles that have been published in the Huffington Post, Dental Economics, several state and local associations, and hopefully soon Dentaltown. Rod enjoys seeing a seller fulfill their dream of retiring and transferring their legacy to a young buyer who matches their philosophy and management style. So the reason I was so excited to get you on the show, my rant is this. Here's my take. Is they, in dental school, the very sophisticated DSOs who have, one or two layers of management are perfect at going into 56 dental schools offering free pizza to have these brilliant, amazing speakers scare the living shit out of all the students that it's all going towards Walgreens and CVS, and the answer to all your problems is come work for me at a DSO. So then I'm sitting out here saying, well, that's just great. They hire all these kids and they live happily ever after. And all I see is they all quit their job within a year. And by the time they're 5 years out of school, they've had 5, 6, 7 different associateship jobs. And then they finally do, after 5 years, what I did in 133 days, which is just open your own damn dental office. I walked out of school May 11, 87, had it open September 21. I just celebrated my 31-year anniversary. So you have to debunk all the baloney that they're telling them. They're telling you, well, you can't get a loan if you got $400,000 student loans, and you don't have the experience to open up a dental office. You don't know what you're doing. Hell, if you don't know what you're doing, I guarantee you the DSOs don't know what they're doing. I mean, not one of them can be publicly traded. You're up there in Seattle. I mean, I'm pretty sure Amazon's publicly traded, Boeing's publicly traded, Starbucks is publicly traded. Why? Because they have a profitable growth business model. These DSOs, they couldn't go public if you put a gun to their head. So I want you to start with people that listen to podcasts are usually not 3 old bald farts like us. Usually they're still in school. They still have hair remaining. I want you to start with just debunking all the stuff the DSOs is telling them at their free pizza lunch in dental school.
Okay, well, I'll start. Well, I think there's, the DSOs do have some good things about them, and you can use them for your experience as far as getting your clinical skills up. I typically hear that it takes about 3 years for a young doctor to have the same hand speed as a selling doctor who's been out of school for 20 years or so. So you can use them to get that experience. As far as owning a practice, statistics are that practice ownership, you make about 20% more than an associate dentist. So there's lots of good reasons to own a practice. You also get to set your own philosophy, your own procedures that you want to do. You hire your own staff. You can work your own hours. You get to control the practice as much as you possibly can. Instead of working for somebody else that says, okay, you need to work from noon till 7 o'clock at night, and here's your staff, and half of them don't know dental assisting at all, those types of things. And 3 weeks later, you get a new dental assistant who you've never seen before, and you have to retrain them all over again. The same with the front desk and hygienists, as well as you could decide when you want to take a vacation, not have the DSO tell you when you want to take a vacation. You can set your own philosophy in the practice as far as what you want to do and what you want to keep in-house and what you want to refer out, those types of things. So there's many reasons to own your own practice instead of working a DSO.
Yeah, I was watching a football game with a dentist the other day, and his breaking straw was, it seemed like every time he got a really difficult procedure, he got a new dental assistant who didn't know anything, and that's literally walked him to the edge. I couldn't imagine doing that. I call my new dental assistant Yoni, who's been with me 12 years, and then the other new one, Christine, who's been there like 18 years. And I mean, they just read your mind. Yeah, that had to be so frustrating. Okay, so then they're going to say, yeah, but dude, I got these private dental schools in Arizona. Midwestern's $100,000 a year in Glendale, Arizona, and AT Still's $100,000 a year. They're like, dude, I'm walking out of school with $400,000 in debt. Is anybody going to finance me with $400,000 in debt?
Yeah, I'll take this one. They will. You know, what they have to look at is the bankers look at this as a cash flow situation. And they look at, when you take on these hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, this is part of your investment into your education. At the end of the day, as long as the bank is convinced that you can handle the busy practice high generous cash flow to cover your payments on your student loan, in addition to making the payments on the practice and having a life, lend you the money. That's a misconception that you have to pay that big debt down.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. The banks also look as having a dental, the dental degree as a positive. They don't look at it as a negative. It's almost like you purchased a $400,000 asset that you can use to generate an income. So the banks look at it as I wouldn't say a positive, but it's not necessarily a negative. So it's a way for you to make a living and to make a good living. So there are, banks are still financing. We've seen doctors with debt as much as $1 million get financed in a practice.
Now, is that because $1 million because it's two kids in dental school got married and they reach $500,000 in debt, or is it just one solo guy? Are you talking about that orthodontist in Las Vegas?
This was a guy from Seattle, actually. He tried to be an orthodontist, so he lived in Manhattan, lived in a super expensive penthouse, and went to dental school, and they kept throwing loans at him, so he kept taking them. And then he thought he wanted to be an orthodontist, so he went to the orthodontic school for, I think, a couple of quarters and decided he didn't want to do that, so he dropped out. Meantime, he accumulated $1 million in debt and decided to go buy a practice, and he got financed. So.
And it's funny because in all the talk about the student loan debt crime, I mean, what's total student loans in the USA up to now? Do you know what the total is? I know it passed $1 trillion. Did it pass 1.5?
US. Right now, the total student loan in the US is $1 trillion.
Just $1 trillion.
It's past $1 trillion.
And they'll never do anything structural about it. The only reason it's $1 trillion debt, well, if I issued every freshman in high school a credit card with $300,000 student loans, they'd all run out and buy a Ferrari. And what the government did is with the student loans and then making it so you can't bankrupt and then giving them ample cash, they borrowed $1 trillion. And then if you try to solve the problem by saying student loans should be able to declare bankruptcy on like any other debt, oh my God, once they started defaulting, the prices of these universities would plummet. But yeah, you offer a kid $100,000 a year, and a lot of them are going to take it because they don't realize how toxic it can be. So another thing about and the skin in the game, the dental schools don't have any. The only skin the dental school has is they can raise their tuition, and the student loans will raise their loaning. So the dental schools don't have any economic incentive to lower their prices. But if you start having those loans tied back to the universities and people start defaulting, they would seriously have to fix some of that structure. But back to skin in the game, these associates don't have any skin in the game, and it ruins their morals. I mean, every dental practice manager lecturer I talk to will tell me that the owner of the practice is sitting up there taking notes while the associates are on their iPhone surfing Facebook and Snapchat. When the owner is taking all these advanced courses on how to do molar endo or place an implant. And the associate's like, oh, I don't care. I'll just send it to an endodontist, and so they don't have skin in the game, and skin in the game helps a lot. I want to ask you another thing about buying a practice. Why should I buy a practice as opposed to start my own? What are the pros and cons of de novo versus purchase?
Cash flow. If you buy an existing practice, you're buying a cash flow. Say you're buying a practice that's doing $1 million a year. As long as you handle that transition well and you can handle the speed, you'll have about $1 million a year of cash flow coming in. If you start your own, you're starting with zero. Now, that doesn't mean you can't build it up, but you literally are starting with zero and a bunch of debt. It's the simplified answer.
So really what you're saying is de novo is risk, because you're starting at zero and you don't know if you're going to build $1 million practice. But when you purchase something, you're eliminating risk. A lot of that money is eliminating risk. Do you have to buy demographics if you're buying a practice? If you already have a practice doing $1 million a year, do you still need demographics?
Situationally, I think at times you could, but for a lot of them, you definitely are taking out the risk if you don't. As you said, if you can handle what this practice is doing clinically, and it's doing $1 million, and as long as you can transition it, there's no reason to think you wouldn't be doing the same $1 million.
And what is the default rate in the U.S. Dental office industry?
It's 0.0125% or thereabouts. So that's the number that we keep getting quoted from various banks.
0.0125?
Yep.
So you said 0.0125%.
Yeah.
So yeah. and every case of those bankruptcies that I know was their license taken away, and 80% of the time it was alcohol or vodka or Vicodin, and then every once in a while, someone puts a hidden camera in the bathroom or something completely insane. But if you're not, and what I don't understand about the substance abuse issue is, you can treat that too. United States was the country that wanted to throw everybody in jail, and it was Portugal who said, look, the United States has been doubling down on prisons and police for 30 years, and their drug rate keeps going higher and higher and higher. So Portugal is one who said, well, America is the poster child to whatever the hell they're doing has to be completely wrong. So they went after the health model and said it's a disease. So let's take the same money we spend on prisons and police and try to find out why this guy is living on a railroad track eating opioids or sniffing meth under a bridge. Then it turns out, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have training. So they took that money and said, let's rescue these people. And they legalized all the drugs. And who has the lowest substance abuse rate in all of Europe? It's Portugal, where it's all legal. And when the police find you with a needle in your arm under a bridge, they call a doctor, not a police officer. So if you're listening to this and you don't know why that when you wake up in the morning, you drink vodka, smoke pot, or eat Vicodin, well, come on, you're a doctor. Figure that shit out. They fix stuff like that. They fix it all day long. And your dental societies, when I got out of school 30 years ago, if they heard anything like that, they threw you under a bridge. Now almost every dental society has a program. So it seems to me that if you can treat substance abuse, there's no default rate in dentistry. And then if you listen to your elders, and I have no skin in this game, you might be listening to these guys saying, well, they're not going to recommend de novo because they're dental practice brokers. Okay, well, I don't sell dental practices for a living, and I used to. That's a whole nother story. That was back in the day. But the bottom line is, dentists, lawyers, physicians don't take orders. The military doesn't want them. Walmart doesn't want them. And dentists, lawyers, and physicians want to do everything their own way. So when you go become an associate, you're too intelligent to be happy because you just don't agree with everything that's being done. And the only way a dentist, a lawyer, a physician is going to be happy is when they're the drummer and they call the shots, and that's their happiness. And not only do they make 20% more money, I don't even think the 20% more money would factor into that much happiness, because it seems like the more and more and more money I make, the less crap I would need. Now I look at all that stuff like I wouldn't want a boat because I don't want to take care of a damn boat. But when you're in high school, you think, oh, I could buy the biggest boat on Saguaro Lake, I'd be the happiest guy. Yeah, until you had to live with the boat for the rest of your life. So it just comes down to peace. I think it's absolutely peaceful to walk into your dental office and know I own this whole damn thing. It's a
Yeah.
totalitarian dictatorship. I don't give any employee money if I don't want to play with them in the playground. And if I don't like them, if they just rub me wrong and I just like, this isn't fun, well, I'd rather have, I'd rather get a new hygienist than work with a hygienist that wasn't fun. I mean, I think the most fun thing about me driving to work is I can't wait to see 50 different people. I mean, I just love them. And I got so many that have been there 10, 20, 30 years. You know, own your own. You just bottom line. And then furthermore, get statistics. Go back to your last, go to your dental school. Every dental student society should have a list of all the graduates and where they are now. And just look at them. Why did they change dental office job? Well, so I'll ask you this. Why do you guys think associate turnover is so high? And first of all, do you agree with that? I mean, or maybe you don't agree with it.
No, it is high, and that's when we talk to a lot of the small groups and even the DSOs, and that's the biggest challenge in opening up a second, third, fourth location with doctors is finding an associate that's going to stick around for a while, and that's worth their salt. A lot of associates, you know, they either don't agree with the philosophy of the doctor. Sometimes they're put under constraints, and you need to produce $5,000 a day, or you're out of here. And you know, that philosophy probably doesn't jive with a lot of associates who are one, they're probably pretty green getting out of school and just getting their hands beat up alone. They can't produce $5,000 a day, or let alone $3,000 a day. So I think that's probably one reason. You know, another reason that the doctor may just be giving him some of the hygiene checks and some of the easy stuff to do, and the low income producing procedures. So that associate gets tired of that, and so they go look for something else, and so they find something else. And probably the third reason is the associate gets tired of that, and they go either do a startup practice or they go buy a practice somewhere. So those are some of the reasons that I think there's a high turnover.
So you know, I practiced 31 years, and the number one feedback I hear from a patient coming from a DSO is, yeah, I really liked it, but then I went back and my doctor wasn't there. And then I saw this lady twice, and I really liked her. And then I went back and she wasn't there. And then I was saying on an earlier podcast about a month ago that I had dinner one night, and this lady's daughter was completely in tears because she was 8 months pregnant, and then she just found out her OBGYN at the HMO hospital is gone. And I've never had a baby before, but I guess if it's your first child and this doctor's been walking you through 8 months, it was just devastating to her that she was going to have to meet a stranger on the big day. So the employee turnover, and I don't want to throw DSOs on a bridge. The employee turnover in private practice is the same as in DSOs.
Yeah.
It's a doctor thing. I mean, in fact, who are the doctors that stay 10 years with you? How would you describe that doctor?
Going to associate the whole time?
Yeah.
Not super motivated a lot of the time. They have a whole lot of life going on, and dentistry tends to be more of a burner. Some of them are they're scared of everything unless they perceive there to be zero risk involved with moving out of having a job. They're just terrified.
Yeah, I would say what I've seen is there's only two types. They either fear everything, and they went into the university, the DSOs, the military, and they just have this blanket fear of all the risk on you. So that's one. But the more success that I've had, if I looked at everyone that stayed with me 10 years or more, they all came from, they had their own practice. So they lived the dream. They had it all. And they were up in snowy Buffalo. They were up in some cold deal. The last kid went to college, and all mom wants is to get the hell out of that weather to sunny Arizona. And the dad says, you know what I'd like to do at this point in my life? Just come here and do dentistry. So, you know, been there, done that, you know, it just wasn't for me. And I get that. On these DSO, what fear is so bizarre. Like I was lecturing in Wichita a while back, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dentists there, and maybe I don't know 400 in the city, and one little DSO came up and opened one little office. Oh my God, it was like a herd of sheep, and a wolf just walked in, and they all just died. And a lot of these kids are saying, "Well, I want to go back home." But they just opened a big DSO there, and I don't really know if I can, now I'm getting afraid because I'm little old 25-year-old Sally, and can I really compete against one of them big bad boy DSOs in the same small town? What would you tell her?
I always tell doctors, don't be afraid of DSOs, and we do startups, and occasionally we'll find a great location with a DSO right across the street, and it's like don't be afraid of them. Is the public and patients don't want to see a different doctor every time they go to a dentist, or let alone a vet or whoever it may be. They want to see someone who's consistently that knows them, and they've built a trust relationship over the years. A lot of these sellers, when they sell a practice, they're crying at the closing table because they're going to miss their patients and their staff. So they've built a bond with those patients. So I tell them, don't be afraid of a DSO, of competing against them at all, for that reason. And also, a lot of times the DSOs are hiring green doctors who don't know what they're doing, and maybe their clinical skills are not the best in the world. I said, you're going to get some of their patients down the road, so don't be afraid of them. A lot of them will open up a new practice and they'll do great. So there's no reason to fear DSOs.
Some of my best friends are dentists on the same street or across the street or down the street from me. Tom Matter and his wife Sharon always had dinner 2 nights ago. I mean, I would, from a purely a business perspective, I'd give anything if they were replaced with some DSO. Brad Sandvik down the street, one of the best dentists in America. I would, from purely an economic point of view, I would love it if I switched him out with a DSO. I mean, I tell these kids, I would rather be in a town that had 4 DSOs and you than in a town where you had Brad Sandvik and Lewis and Accor and Tom and Sharon Mattern. And I mean, those people who have skin in the game and they own their own thing and they're good people and they're honest. And if something goes wrong, they'll fix it. No questions asked. That's who you should fear, not some mismanaged thing. But I do want to tell you one thing I don't like about the trends. I want to talk about the trends in the transition industry. We were talking earlier about skin in the game. When you're an employee, you have no skin in the game. As an owner, you do. Back in the day, the seller would carry the paper. So he would never sell to someone who wasn't going to be successful. I mean, if you had the wrong attitude, if he knew you were going to rub everyone the wrong way, if he knew you were a narcissistic nut job, he wouldn't let you buy his practice because he didn't want you to take over his patients and he didn't want you to default on the debt. So they would carry the paper. And then when you got in trouble, you had some old dentist that come down there and help you out. He can call an old patient that's upset. Now it's this faceless institution where the seller finances it through some bank 1,000 miles away from home. Is it a good thing that the seller has no skin in the game once they cash out? Is that really a good incentive for our industry? Do you think the seller should have to carry half and a bank carries the other half? Do you think that would, I guess with a default rate of 0.0125, no one cares, but what do you think about the transition from owner finance to stranger bank finance?
Go ahead, Corey.
I got that one. Okay.
I see Rod.
I see your point with that, Howard. It's it definitely would put more of an emphasis on the seller. The hard part is that, as a reality, especially if the DSO is coming on board, it's hard to go back to that because the DSOs, they'll have 20% holdbacks a lot of times, but they're willing to write such a big check. It's going to be hard to convince the sellers to go back to carrying half of that debt themselves for no other reason. The banks also, the reality of it is the banks are just, they love to lend this money out, again, because of the very low default rate.
And it's a big loan.
Seen it go back to that.
I mean, what is the average practice loan you guys deal with? You're in Seattle, you're in Ohio. What is or do you guys mostly work Seattle, Ohio, or are you doing national, or what is your territory?
We're up and down the West Coast, and Corey covers the Midwest, so we have quite a bit of the United States covered.
And what is the website?
Omni-pg.com.
Omni, OMNI.
Yep,
And
dash.
and what does the PG stand for?
Practice Group.
So, and Omni stands for, that is a omnidirectional radar.
Yep, exactly.
Where did you get the name Omni?
Originally, when I first started the company, we were doing all different things in the dental world. We were doing consulting, we were doing accounting, we do the acquisitions, we were doing real estate, so a whole bunch of different things. So we were kind of Omni means all, so.
Yeah, Omni means all of all things in all ways or places. And the website is www.omni-pg.com.
Yep.
What are my homies going to find at omni-pg.com?
Oh, that's where we have our listings throughout all the different states that we're in. In addition, we have videos and some educational things. So that's one of the things that we try to do, especially we hold buyers seminars and sellers seminars. We try to educate people on, if you're 5 years out from selling your practice, we talk about what you should and shouldn't be doing before you sell. And buyers, we started buyer seminars because buyers were so green, and they'd sign a letter of intent and they'd say, okay, now what do I do? And so we started doing seminars to train them on, it's like, these are the steps you take to buy a practice. So there's different videos out there on that and selling, as well as I think we've got a few real estate seminars doing startup practices.
Now, do you ever sell practices to DSOs, or do you ever buy them for DSOs, or any of those guys your clients? And if so, what are they looking for?
They call us all the time asking about our practices, because they're typically looking for a practice doing over $1 million. They want, like Corey said, the seller to carry back 20%, and they want them to stay on for 2 years, and then they have to reach certain goals in order to get that last 20%. But we haven't sold to any of the major DSOs. We've sold quite a bit to some of the small groups who own 2 to 10 practices, but none of the major DSOs like the Heartlands and General Dentals and those types. We've never really sold a practice to those guys.
And plus, Heartland has they have a pretty big internal team that does all of this.
I was going to say, in a lot of ways, they're competition to us because they're doing marketing to sellers and things like that. And I'm not, trying not to bash the DSOs and say they're the worst thing in the world. There are good places, good things about DSOs, but I just wanted to.
I podcasted the CEOs of so many major DSOs, Rick Workman, Steve Thorne. I mean, I love the guys. Business is competition. I mean, you could not be. I mean, last night the Patriots barely beat my undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. I went to University of Missouri, Kansas State Dental School, and there wouldn't have been a great game if there wasn't great competition. And so I don't see any of it as personal. So when go back to the kid, he's been out of school a couple years. He's getting his speed. He wants to have his own place. What should he be looking for in a practice? What if his hometown has 3 practices for sale besides price? What should she be looking at?
Largely you got to look at the type of procedures that are being done in that practice. Can you clinically right now go in and do most of them? Now, it doesn't have to be an absolute match, but realize what you're buying you need to be able to do, or you have to deal with that. Let's say the practice you're looking at buying does 20% of its revenue from implants, and you currently don't do implants at all. That's 20% that you either got to figure out how to do really quick, or you're just going to walk away from. So that to me is a big fit. I think it's also a fit personality-wise. I think sometimes gets lost on this. There's a temperament issue. Some dentists are very laid back. Some are very draconian. And I don't mean that as a judgmental thing, but when the staff and the patients are used to one personality type, it can be a bit drastic if the exact opposite personality type comes in and takes over.
Great point. Also to that point, if you buy a practice from someone who loves selling, this guy does all these big cases, but he loves selling and he's got the personality for sales. He's a salesperson. And then you have the personality, I don't like sell. I mean, if you're a 1-tooth molar a year dentist, and you got two practices for selling to $1 million, and one does it one tooth at a time, and one does it on 20% of the patients at a $10,000 case at a time, that's a huge red flag. So yeah, so if he's doing all of his implants and pulling his wisdom teeth and doing molar endo, and you can't do any of those three things, you know, that's the wrong practice. But I want you to flip that around and find a practice where you can do everything he's doing. If he's selling big cases, you're great in sales. If he's doing just insurance, PPO, dentistry, one tooth at a time, that's you, whatever. But let's say it's an old man like any three of us who, Corey, do you just love pedo? I mean, is a 3-year-old pulpotomy your thing?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I would rather go to hell than be a pediatric dentist. When people ask me what I think about this new silver diamine fluoride, I say, well, I feel sorry for everything about pediatric dentistry. But if you like kids and you see this practice is doing $1 million a year and he refers out all his pedo and you love kids, or a dentist that didn't do his molar endo and you love molar endo. I mean, I want you to find a dentist where you can do everything he does, and then you could get a free dental office. You could absolutely get a dental office for free if you could go in and add a service to that dental office that generates enough revenue to make your payment. And a lot of these dentists that are older, they love to talk about their cases and all these things like that. But man, so many of them leave so much opportunity on the table. The biggest one I ever saw in my life, this is just unbelievable. It was in Palm Springs, and it was a friend of me and Mike Totola's. And me and Totola were about 6 hours apart, in Palm Springs, about splits of difference. This guy found this old farty-duddy practice. It wasn't doing much. It was real low dollars, and he was only attracted to it because his mindset was, I want to buy a less expensive office. So it was like half the price. All the offices at the time were going for, like, back in the day, you know, they were all going for $600-700, and this one was going for like $300. The man patched everything with amalgam for 40 years and had this old office with 3 rundown chairs with 2 hygienists, and every day at least 4 of his existing MODBL amalgams would crumble apart, and they would come in and do $1,000 crown. Yeah. And I mean, he just sat there doing 4-5 crowns a day. Any day he was open. I mean, and the guy didn't do his molar endo. He didn't place implants. He didn't do sleep apnea, Invisalign. He didn't do anything. He just found a guy who patched everything with amalgam for 40 years. The big question, when I was a little kid in our church was Dan and Beverly Carney. They were the founders of Pizza Hut. And Dan was I mean, it's pretty cool when you're in a small town and the most famous guy in your town, Dan Carney, the founder of Pizza Hut, was the most down-to-earth, and he still is. And but I mean, me and my friend Jim Bell, sometimes we had a business idea. We'd drive over to Pizza Hut headquarters, and you could literally walk in there, ask the secretary, can I talk to Dan? And she just laughs, like, sure. And he'd treat us like we were serious, you know, like we actually had a brain. And I asked him this specific question before I did my dental office. I said, Dan, should I own the land and building for my dental office since I'm going to be there for 40 years, or should I rent? Because it seems like it's pretty stupid to throw your rent away. He goes, Howard, at Pizza Hut, we make all of our money off Pizza Hut. We're not in the real estate business. I only buy the land and building when I'm in some area where that's what I have to do. But if given the choice, I just want to put all my money in the business. My business grows fast. Real estate is like, it's just like a bond fund or an index fund. It's just this steady, slow appreciation. But your business is something you can double, you can triple, you can expand. He goes, don't put any of your money in real estate. But the kid asks you, should I own the real estate or should I rent for 40 years?
But it depends on a couple of things. Well, one, do you want to own multiple practices? Because if you're going to buy real estate, you're going to use up your capital, so you won't be able to get loans. So, you know, that's one of the things. The other thing is, in the current market with the interest rate so low, your monthly rent payment may be $5,000 a month, but your monthly mortgage payment may be $4,000 a month. So in that case, why wouldn't you purchase your building instead of paying rent? And you know, the building, you build up equity and put that money away towards retirement. So it's, in the current economy in most places, it makes more sense to buy your building today. Now, 10 years from now, that may flip. The interest rates may be back up to 7-8%, and the rent may be $4,000 and the mortgage may be $8,000. So in those scenarios, it makes more sense to probably rent than own. So
that is, it's funny how emotional business is, because you know, like the interest, you know, the Fed's, you know, moving interest rates, you know, and it's, you know, it's gone from 2 to 3, and it's like having a meltdown in the bond market and the equities market, and everybody's freaked out. Dude, I graduated from high school in 1980. You know what it was in 1980? 21%. When I got out of middle school in 87 and I bought my first house a year later, I thought I was a genius, because my mortgage was at 12% and the guy selling it to me, his old mortgage was 14%. And he was trying to get me to acquire his loan so I didn't have to go through all the loan deal. I'm not going to acquire 14% when I can get 12. And now everybody's like, oh my God, if the Fed keeps this up, and all the Fed's doing is normalizing interest rates. They need to be at 5%. And I swear to God, if it went from 3% to 5% today, that market would lose 20% of its value, because people are just that. I mean, and I want to give you one thing on interest rates. If you study the history of finance going all the way back to the beginning of time, you always want to hold the same hand as the superpower. If the superpower is holding all their money in gold and silver, that's your best bet. Right now, your superpower is $19 trillion in debt. So their only incentive is to make that useless. They want inflation. Even the Fed says they want inflation to be 2%. They would like to pay off that dollar of debt with. They'd like to pay it down with an inflationary dollar. And so interest rates. I think it's very abusive that grandma and grandpa save their money their whole life and put $1,000 in the bank, and then the bank pays a 1% interest. The only reason they're getting paid 1% interest is because the government has $19 trillion debt. Back in the day, banks, you'd put in $1, they'd give you a nickel for interest, they'd loan it out for a dime, and they'd make the nickel spread. But due to our out of control, completely insane deficits, you know, interest rates are so low. It's basically free money. In fact, if you go back after 2008, you actually had negative interest rates. I mean, it takes an hour to explain what negative interest rates are, but I mean, so debt.
Compounding.
But the only thing I found in the last 31 years when dentists got in trouble with debt is when they didn't have fixed debt. All of a sudden, the interest rates would change significantly, and they had debt that was floating 200 basis points over treasuries or something published in the Wall Street Journal. And if you're going to go in debt, you need to lock down that interest rates. Do your loans, do you guys lock down interest rates, or are they floating?
Most of them are fixed these days. So, yeah.
But when you say most of them, what percent are not fixed?
Well, I would say it's probably 90% are fixed and 10% are variable these days.
Yeah, I would not get a variable interest rate. I think that's a very risky situation. Also, is it one loan bundles real estate and business, or do you break those up?
Typically, they're broken up into 2 separate loans, one for the practice, one for the building. And another thing on real estate is you want to control where your practice is going to be. We've run across several situations, especially in this past 2 years, where the landlord has a teardown clause in the building. And this guy's 65 years old, and he called me up to sell his practice, and we discovered that there's a teardown. We went to extend the lease, and he said, no, I'm not planning on renewing the lease in 2 years. I'm planning on tearing the building down. So you don't want that to happen to you, especially when you're 65, about ready to retire. Now his practice went from a value of about $800,000 down to we're not sure we're going to be able to sell it because there's not going to be a place to practice. So you want to be able to control your physical plant throughout your career.
And that is another huge problem that dentists and physicians have. They think, well, since they live their whole life being the smartest person in the room, that when they go sign a lease, they don't need anybody to look at that. They're a dentist. I went to the Ohio State University. Why the hell would I have to have somebody read my lease? And you look at these lawyers on Dentaltown, and these guys are showing their leases all day long, and it's like, well, who did you have read that over? I mean, that's malpractice. You could go back and sue that attorney. Oh, I didn't use an attorney. So you applied algebra and trig and the Krebs cycle, to a real estate attorney and you didn't know what a teardown clause? I mean, it's just my favorite yoga place went under because they didn't understand their lease. There's this big leak on the roof, and it's a poor little yoga studio. They don't make any money. And according to their lease, guess who had to fix the whole damn thing?
The yoga
roof,
studio.
everything. So the only thing they could do is go bankrupt.
Yep.
And of course, when you ask a yoga instructor, well, who was your real estate attorney? I mean, I would go back and get in his face with this lease that he signed. I signed it at Starbucks. What? Really? So in yoga, I don't remember in any yoga class going over terms and conditions in real estate. Yeah. So guys, I mean, it's the same thing going to the board. They go, oh, I don't need a lawyer. I'm going to the board. I mean, I did everything right. Yeah, I don't care if you did anything right or wrong. It's still a legal transaction by a board from the state government, and there's attorneys who walk every single case through there for decades, and you don't know anything. You're going in there all emotional. And also, one last thing on the state board thing is, all my friends, I mean, you just refund the money. And you say, well, it's not fair. Well, do you want to sleep with a knot in your stomach for a week and then cancel all your patients on Tuesday to go down and listen to a bunch of state board people because you didn't give Wanda back her $1,000 for her denture? Really? That's the best use of your time and resource? And so leave your ego I think the people who do the most successful like me are just humble. They just know what they know. They know what they don't know. They use attorneys. They're the first people to raise their hand and say, I want help. And the dad, when you were little, who would never slow down and ask for directions and had to find it himself and was always 45 minutes late because he was a stubborn mule, those are the dentists that get in all the trouble. You know, well, I want to go back to trends and transitions. So sometimes in my 30 years, they say it's a buyer's market. Sometimes it's a seller's market. Sometimes you want to be the kid that's looking to buy a practice. Sometimes you want to be the doctor selling a practice. What is it today? Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? Who's got the upper hand? The old man selling a practice or the young kid buying one?
Definitely a seller's market right now. You know, there's a supply and demand problem. There are a lot of, for whatever reason, there seems to be a holdup of a lot of guys sitting on their practices and hanging on to it a little bit longer. We get contacts all the time, buyers looking.
So continue. It's a seller's market because a lot of dentists who maybe 10, 20 years ago would have sold earlier hung on to their practice longer. Is that what you accounted to? Or was it incorrect?
I understand, yeah, there's a lot of people hanging on. I'm not even 100% sure why that is going on.
Well, they've opened up 6 more dental schools in the last 10 years, so that's a lot of people in the supply chain. I mean, if you expand your graduation class, you can't really do anything to the selling grandpa class.
Yeah.
Well, you also have a big push. There's almost in some cases more buyers because you have the DSOs and the small groups trying to buy up practices as well. So in addition to the individual solo guys buying practices, you have these guys who, and everywhere I turn to, there's a new course and a new seminar on how to start your own DSO and how to own multiple practices and those types of things. So there's a big push from all the consultants to like, you need to be a small DSO in order to fight all the insurance companies and to get better reimbursements from the insurance companies and those types of things. So they're really pushing these doctors to own multiple practices. So there's a bigger buyer pool than maybe in prior years. You know, interest rates are also low. That helps the buyer market. So they're, you know, the value of a practice is all around cash flow, and that's what the banks look at. So if interest rates are low, the payments are lower, so their cash flow will be better with the interest rates being lower. And also the economy is doing well in most places. So the more patients are doing dentistry, so that helps practices do better and makes their values go up. So the sellers are at a point where they want to sell their practices right now. And plus, when the economy is doing well, their 401ks are performing better and their investments are performing better, so they can retire and sell their practices.
Even in Kentucky, instead of calling it the toothbrush, its times are so good they're calling it the teeth brush now. That's where the toothbrush was
That's
invented.
a good economy.
Where they only had one
That's
tooth,
a good
so they called
barometer.
it the toothbrush. Yeah. So rural or urban? Some people tell me that in the big urban centers practices, you put up for sale, they're so liquid. A lot of these times they'll put up a practice, get several offers the first month. But then some people say there's rural nightmares where there's practices that have been listed for years with no interest because they're in a small town. So is there any difference between urban and rural in your guys' experience?
Definitely. I think the rural is, it depends on how rural. If you have a rural practice that's a reasonable commute to a major metropolitan area, those are fairly easy to sell. If you have a true rural practice, which is like 2 to 3 hours from anywhere, those are a challenge. And a lot of that just comes down to, in my opinion, you have a lot of these dentists, of course, grow up in a rural area, but the dental schools are in a big urban area. They move there when they're young. They need somebody they love. They might have had thoughts of going back when they were 19, but by the time they're 26, they love this area they're in. They don't want to leave. Their wife is from there. They just don't want to go back. So the pool of people who are open to going to rural areas gets much smaller than the people that are willing to stay in the urban areas.
So if you're in dental school, if you heard Rod correctly, he said in dental school, never date a girl from a big city because you might fall in love with her and then you'll be in a highly competitive area, because it's my experience that the only girl that's going to go back to a town of 5,000 was born in a town of 5,000. I mean, even my son, my oldest son's a class example. Met a girl in Phoenix, fell in love, this and that. As soon as they start dropping frogs, guess where my daughter-in-law wanted to go? Back to Beeville, Texas, town of 5,000 where her mama is and her grandpa is and her dad. And so, I mean, I had a patient one time. They were retirees. They were so sad because they thought they were doing the best thing for their 2 children by having them travel abroad during their university studies. So they put them on this program. One wanted to go to London and one wanted to go to France. There are only 2 daughters. And guess what their 2 daughters did while going to college in London and France?
Met somebody from London and France.
And now their grandbabies are in London and France. And so they should write a country music song, Never Let Your Daughter Study Abroad. And then I rented this 1,000 times to dental school deans. There's only one dean in the United States who's smart enough to understand this, and it was Jack Dillenberg in Arizona. All the rural communities were underserved. And Pew.org is the best demographics in America because it's a huge nonprofit who shows you where there's no dentist. The underserved. About 70% of their work is in saving the oceans, and the next biggest thing they try to do is study healthcare. And Jack Dillenberg was one that says, well, yeah, because every dental school accepts you based on your algebra, calculus, DAT scores. So you have all this war at the top. Well, a kid that goes to a high school with 4,000 kids will be significantly more competitive than a kid who goes to a high school with 50 kids. When you're the smartest math person in a school of 50 kids, you think you're real smart. But when they transfer you to a high school with 4,000, you start to learn there's kids actually smarter than you. And Jack was the first one that started saying, oh, you're applying from an Indian reservation that doesn't have a dentist. Well, yeah, you're accepted. I don't care. End of story. Oh, you're from a town of 5,000. Where do you want to go when you graduate? I want to go home. Okay, you're accepted. And it's the same thing in universities when I go visiting small businesses in Arizona. Like I've met several businesses in Arizona near Kingman, near Seligman, where I say, well, what is your biggest limit to growth? And they say, well, you know how hard it is to get a mechanical engineer in Seligman? And every time a boy from Seligman applies to ASU, his grades aren't good enough to get in, so he doesn't get in. And then the kids they accepted, if they're all born in Phoenix, guess what? What's the chance that they're going to want to graduate their newfound degree and go to Seligman, Arizona? So
much higher.
There needs to be some overtask because all the universities are all fighting over their rankings. So they're more concerned about their rankings than they are about their communities. And it's a very perverse incentive. You know, I could rant on that forever. So what do you think, in your experience, the rural practices have lower overhead and the doctors make more net income than the urban dentists?
No, I think the rural practices have higher overhead typically than the urban dentists. So, or the other way around actually. So if you're further out, you're probably going to have lower overhead because you're not.
Yeah, you said that exactly backwards.
Yeah, I did.
So the rural practices have lower overhead and higher net income, and the urbans have higher overhead and lower net income. And explain to my homies why that is.
Well, in Seattle, for example, you can't even find a hygienist. There's not many of them around. They're getting paid $50 an hour just out of hygiene school. So there's big competition in downtown or the Seattle area for hygienists, as well as dental assistants as well. You have all the Microsofts and Amazons. Even taking the assistants, you can get $35 an hour just being an admin answering the phone at Microsoft, or you can be a dental assistant making $20 an hour. So there's not as many dental assistants around. So if you go into, and rent is incredibly high in the downtown area. So it's $40, $35 a square foot, where you go to a practice further away from downtown areas, it's going to be $12 or $15 a square foot. And there's not as much competition for staffing. So the hygienists, there may only be a few job openings. So hygienists are a little easier to find, assistants are easier to find. Those types of things help keep your overhead down.
So I'm going to go back to the example I just used. So this guy was whining to me, and he was telling me that he's never going to get a hygienist. There's none in his town of 5,000. No one would drive 2 hours from Wichita, Kansas, to go to his. No one's going to commute 2 hours to work each day. So I came up with this great idea. I said, you know what? Go to your high school and have an essay contest of why I want to be a dental hygienist, and then and then the winner, you pay her tuition to go to hygiene school, and then she comes home and she's the hygienist that she won the prize. So he ran the contest, calls me back. Only 2 people wrote an essay, and he wanted to know if I would read over them to help him decide which one won. I said, quit being a dumb bastard, send them both. Send them both.
Exactly.
So he sets the whole thing up, and then guess what happened? Their grades weren't high enough to get into hygiene school.
Yeah,
oh, brother.
I mean, like really? So a C in algebra is really that affects your dental hygiene skills? I mean, I've never been in the middle of a root canal and need to know jack about calculus, and this stuff. I want to ask you an off-topic question. You're from Seattle. I'm just curious. I'm being selfish here. Why did Bill Ackman just invest nearly $1 billion in Starbucks? I mean, he's a highly activist investor. Is there something wrong with Starbucks where he wants a couple board seats and is going to change directions? I mean, wasn't Starbucks already all that in a bag of chips?
Yeah, there's one on not only every corner, but halfway between the corners as well here in Seattle. So I don't know the answer to that. I really don't like their coffee, to be quite honest. Like I go to the non-Starbucks locations, but I don't know the answer.
Don't know the answer. Is it making a lot of news in Seattle since that's where you're from?
Not really. Haven't really seen that too much.
Hey, he's an interesting character. He's hard to say what that guy's thinking up his sleeves. But back to urban or rural. My gosh, every dentist I see that goes about 2 hours from wherever there is an airport, they're just crushing it. They don't have to take any of the insurance. They don't take any of the PPOs. They charge $1,000 for a crown, $1,000 for a root canal, $1,000 for an implant, $1,000 for a denture, $1,000 for a partial. They just crush it. And then the ones that go in downtown Seattle, they're on every PPO. They're on Delta Dental. There's everybody's got a website and a Facebook page, and I mean it's and so the bottom line, if I was dental schools, I would accept kids from the rural. And when you go to that rural school, I mean when you're that rural country boy and you go into downtown Kansas City at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, don't marry some girl who grew up in eyesight of the Chiefs Stadium. Don't marry some girl who likes to go to the plaza, and you're never going to drag her back to the country. So just if you're in dental school and and you got student loans and you want to be rich someday, it's just as easy to fall in love with a country girl as it is a city girl.
That should be one of the first questions on your date is where are you from? So that's
yeah. And last but not least, I want to talk about demographics, because if you're 25 and you buy a practice and, you know, say you're going to practice 40 years, man, communities can change. Look what happened to Detroit. Hell, they went from 2.7 million to 700,000. I would want to know, in real estate, they say from the time they build a brand new community house to the time it's a crack house and bulldozers are going to hit it and mow it down, it's about 100 years. It's about 100 years from this nicest house in the community to we need to tear this thing down. How do these kids, first of all, do demographics matter? And if so, how do you experts find demographic information? Where do you go? What do you Google? What are you looking for?
Yeah, we actually pay for a service. It's called Site to Do Business. It's through the CCIM Institute. So we get all kinds of different.
What's the website on that?
It's called Site to Do Business.
Just Google site, S-I-T-E, site.
Yep.
To do business.
Yeah, and it's part of this CCIM for commercial real estate brokers, and we pay for that service. It has a lot of detailed information, including how much dentistry is spent on a certain zip code and those types of things. So we get to look at those types of demographics.
So is it free, or do I got to log in? Do I got to get an account?
It's a paid subscription.
And so you like that one?
Yeah, it gives a lot of detailed information on dentistry and various demographics. But I guess one thing is it all depends on what you're in dentistry for. You need to the dental piece of it, or you need to make money. And I guess not sure what the percentage the split in is on that. So if you're from a rural area and you want to just go back to your hometown and do dentistry, the money's going to follow you. So it all depends on just where you want to practice. But if you're going to be practicing in more of an urban area, you'll want to do demographics. You'll want to figure out how many doctors there are, how many patients per doctor, those types of things, how many homes are owned in a certain area, what the average income is, and what the spend is for dentistry in that specific area. So you want to figure all those things out. So we help look at the demographics of certain areas when we do our transitions.
So how much would a kid have to pay on that Site to Do Business to start looking at his area?
Well, they can contact us and we can help them get that information. It's about, I think we pay about $350 a month for that.
Okay, and how do they contact you?
They can go onto our site and they can shoot us an email, info@omni-pg.com.
So info@omni-pg.com.
Yep.
And so were there any questions that I wasn't smart enough to ask?
No, I think you hit most of them. I think right now it's a like I mentioned. I think when I wrote to you, it was a perfect storm to be selling practice, and it's a great time to be buying practice. So it's a good time for both sides to both get in and get out of dental. And just because you sell your practice doesn't mean you have to stop doing dentistry. That's one point we make to a lot of the sellers is, if you feel that your equity is high enough and you don't want to wait until your practice goes downhill, we always suggest that they sell now and then go and work for somebody else or go teach.
Arizona and work for you, Howard.
I would love that. I would love that. If you're a short, fat, bald guy who's living in the snow, my mom just called me this morning. She got her first snow in Wichita, Kansas. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I mean, it's still, yesterday was Sunday. I couldn't even wear a shirt in the backyard. It's so hot. Hey, have you ever had a dentist sell the practice because they had to get a bunch of equity out to pay off a divorce?
Oh, yeah. Yep, we've had several of those over the years, and that's happened. There's a lot of reasons that doctors sell their practice, and more and more over the last probably 3 years or so, doctors are wanting to sell because they're tired of managing staff, they're tired of battling insurance companies, they're just tired of dealing with healthcare company or healthcare investigations and those types of things. So they're not just selling to retire anymore. They're selling because they're tired of the business of dentistry and they just want to practice dentistry.
And here's what all the dental consultants will tell you at a bar, but they won't tell you on a podcast or a show, but a lot of those guys, when they're tired of the stress, they're tired, there's something underlying in their tool. Their depression. They have depression. And doctors are so egomaniac, they can't come to terms that, well, maybe they're depression. Maybe they have a depressive lifestyle. Maybe they don't exercise. Maybe they drink too much. But when you have all these burnout, so much of burnout is because you're not taking care of your tool, you're not exercising, you're not eating right, or you're hanging around with toxic people like maybe your spouse or something like that. But man, when all you want to do is run from a job where the average general dentist is making $178,000 a year and the average specialist is making $330,000, and you're from Seattle, I mean, do you want to go work in a Starbucks? Okay, they give you $15 an hour. You know how far it is from $15 an hour to $177,000 a year? And so many of these dental consultants say, oh my God, he's driving the staff crazy. He's not happy. He's miserable. And it's hard to tell a doctor, like, you need to get a physical. You need to see a therapist. I had a lot of that success with TMJ. I didn't really believe in so much of all the TMJ noise because I was lecturing all around the world, and all the rest of the world, their epidemiologists were saying that when a human gets really stressed, it goes into 5 spasms. A brain, that's a headache. But Americans say, oh no, it's gluten and dark chocolate and red wine. No, it's stress. Lower back, the whole chiropractic industry, irritable bowel syndrome, heart issues, and grinding your teeth. And so many times I would just ask them, after I went through all the Pankey Institute and all these occlusion courses and got my master's in energy, I just say, dude, do you think there's any chance you might be stressed? And yeah. And I had 2 referrals, one for the boys to John up the street, one for the girls, this other woman. And I can't tell you, 31 years later, how many of the biggest love feedback fests I've gotten from patients saying, man, Howard, the best thing you ever did for me wasn't fixing my damn tooth. When you sent me to Dr. John, oh my God, I was in a world of shit. I saw him every Tuesday for a year to get my life back on track.
Wow.
And it was the best thing that ever happened. And he told me, you got to fix this or it's going to ruin everything. So maybe if your dental office is going downhill, maybe if come on, for $177,000 a year, how many Starbucks people would change places with a dentist if they didn't have to go to dental school to manage the staff and deal with insurance for $177,000 a year? What percent of them would take that?
90.
Yeah. So look at your tool. If you're not happy, a lot of times a physician and a psychologist can tell you 10 major reasons why you're not happy, beginning with lifestyle, diet, toxic people, in a bad relationship. I could go on and on and on. But hey, you guys are legends. Thank you so much for taking an hour of your life and spending with my homies today. I hope you start a thread and drop all those YouTube videos in there. Thanks for helping my homies make better decisions.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us on, Howard.
My God, this was the 3 most gorgeous people ever on a podcast. we should do 23andMe and find out if we're first cousins, second cousins, or third cousins. But I know we got to be related. Have a great day.
Thank you.